Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee, getting ready to start my day, get some squats going. Today I thought I would talk with you guys a little bit about psychological stress and even psychological arousal when it comes to recovery from training. Because, we spend a lot of time talking about the stress recovery adaptation cycle. Most people are willing to talk in detail about physical stress, meaning they would say, oh, you've got to recover from your training. And we can talk about single factor versus dual factor recovery, all that stuff all day long. And we do sometimes, but the whole point we come to is that there's always this heavy focus on physical stress, whether it's the physical stress from your job. Maybe you have a physically demanding job, you have other activities you do outside the weight room, outside of your training, how those might impact your recovery, those aspects of your lifestyle. And we talk a lot about how training stress itself, again, you have to recover from it in order to grow. And sometimes you've got to find things like your maximum recoverable volume versus your minimum effective volume, stuff like Dr. Mike talks about a lot. And these are important things to look at. But what oftentimes gets overlooked is the psychological aspects of it. And it's just overall stress in your life. Overall stress in your life will impact your recovery from the gym. It will impact your strength gains. It will impact your muscle gains. Now, some people say, well, will it affect fat loss in the sense of it might be catabolic to muscle tissue. So in some cases, high amounts of stress can cause you to lose more muscle when you're losing weight. And in some cases, it might cause people to have more trouble sticking to a diet and overeat more. So then they don't lose fat. And I mean, a perfect example, if you guys recall, when I left the UK, I was going through a lot of stuff in my personal life, obviously, at that point. A major move, major separation from a long-term relationship, a lot of stuff going on. You guys saw me drop down under 200 pounds. And a lot of people don't realize that, but I dropped under 200 pounds by the time, or the first few weeks I was back in Texas, right? I was down to 195 at one point there. Yeah, I lost body fat, but I lost muscle also. Again, the stress of it, it affected that. So, major things going on in your life can impact that. So the question becomes, how do we mitigate some of that? Well, what I would tell you is that you need to learn to manage stress in your life. You need to learn to manage stress if you want to make your best gains in the gym. Now, that's not always easier said than done. I haven't always personally dealt with it well myself. You guys have seen different points in my life on here on YouTube to where I didn't manage the stress as well, and you could see the difference in terms of musculature, things like that. I struggled with gain, struggled with progress, everything else. When I had outside interference that messed with me on a psychological level, caused me stress, everything else. And you know what? That happens to everybody. That's normal. So what I would say is you've got to learn to manage that. And not only that, it's not just about your gains. Yeah, you can motivate people with gains to find ways to manage their stress, but it will also impact your quality of life, how long you live. There's a reason historically in the workforce, men have had heart attacks at much higher rate and at much younger ages than women. It's not just biological. It oftentimes had to do with the stress of the work environment. Just stuff that we know. I mean, stress itself can eventually lead to heart attacks, elevated blood pressure, all those things. So what I would say to you is learn to manage your stress. You need to step back and learn to assess things going on in your life and decide if things are worth getting stressed and upset about or if they're minor things. You really have to categorize that stuff. And if your gains are important to you, you have to learn to do this with everything. When you have something that's starting to get you stressed out or upset, whether it's your work, because your job can be stressful. I don't care what you do for a living. Doesn't matter what you do for a living, there can be stress associated with it. But how you choose to internalize that stress, whether you choose to just let it go and deal with it. In other words, when you have a problem or a situation, step back and say, okay, rather than freak out about this, what's my solution? Focus on solution-based mindset instead of panic-based mindset. All right? And always be prepared that if your solution doesn't work, have contingency. Just think those things. We put your energy into solutions instead of an emotional response to these situations, whether it's a professional, family life, whatever. And it's even harder sometimes in our personal lives. That's where emotions and stress will get to us the most. But again, comes a point to where we have to learn to take a different approach. In other words, when you start feeling those stressful emotions coming up relating to these events, step back and ask yourself, is me getting upset, angry, sad, depressed, whatever it happens to be, this negative emotional response, is it worth it? Is that going to solve the problem? And if you can't solve the problem, that's when it gets more stressful. There is no solution. Well, you've got to step back and go, well, I don't have a solution to this. I better work on something else more constructive in my life. In the meantime, instead of dwelling on it while I think of solutions, instead of thinking about how you feel about it. Solutions, not feelings. That's, again, how you lower your stress. Just my experience with it. The other thing is going to be learning to take real relaxation time. Something I have to do a lot of. That's one thing people ask me. Hey, Jason, you're training right now. There's some problems with what you're doing. You shouldn't be deadlifting with heavy singles every day after you squat every day. How are you recovering from that? Well, I'm not fully recovering, obviously. I'm not using a single factor recovery model here, so I'm not actually really fully ever recovered. But how am I managing it and still managing to deadlift and everything? My squat sometimes has problems as a result. Mitigating my stress. I keep a low stress environment. I take as much time as I can get away with laying down and reading and doing relaxing things. Sitting at your computer desk, typing, playing video games isn't actually as relaxing. And that can be fun. That can be things you enjoy doing, but you need to take time to where you literally put yourself in a position where your body can physically relax. You need to take time for that every day, whether it's reading a book or listening to music. But you've got to learn to relax. Take hot baths, things that will de-stress you. I'll meditate if you need to, but I enjoy laying around reading, and I probably spend about 4 hours every day laying down on my couch reading with my feet propped up, pillows under my knees, everything, so that, again, I'm in a relaxed recovery condition, and that'll help de-stress you, finding things like that de-stress you. Those are important. Not spending a lot of time doing things that are going to give you a high level of psychological arousal, which now we come to the point with training. If stress is an impact in your life in any way, that's one of the reasons I tell people pre-workouts are absolutely stupid. Not only are they proven not to work based upon the research we have, you are creating a higher state of psychological arousal in the gym. Again, you start looking at stuff like Matt Perryman's stuff that he's been doing his doctoral work on, who wrote a book called Squat Every Day. Is that when you start getting into really high frequency training, it's very beneficial, it works well, but there is a component that he's noticed, and a lot of people notice, is that the more psychologically aroused you become, the more psyched up you become on lifts, the more it impacts your recovery. And it's not just the physical aspect of it. In other words, coming up and squatting 500 pounds for one rep, if you are extremely taxed and hyped up and you're coming to the bar all angry and pissed and slap yourself first versus coming up and squatting the same weight calmly, the more aroused one will be more difficult to recover from. There's, again, a psychological component to your recovery that is just as strong as the physical. So the more you psych yourself up in the gym, the more it's going to dig into your recovery inroads, the longer it's going to take you to recover from that particular set, that particular session, everything else. So that comes back to the point of stims, pre-workouts, things like that. If you're taking something that boosts your aggression in the gym, you better be taking something that improves your recovery. That's why certain drugs work really well, because they contain both at the same time. It's the reason people like those drugs. You only have the one component, you're shooting yourself in the foot. It's better to train calmer unless you have a perfect lifestyle or you do a low enough frequency training that you're going to be able to recover from it. And again, people who aren't pushing the bleeding edge in their training don't have to worry about this as much. But then we come back to the point of, wouldn't you make better progress if you could do more training while you're in the gym, lift heavier, do more reps, more sets, everything else, and still recover from it because you managed to keep yourself at a lower level of psychological arousal? You're going to make more progress from that because you're going to be able to recover from it better, so you'll be able to do more weekly tonnage because the psychological component is lower. So mitigating your stress in your professional life, personal life, your relaxation time, all matters, but also the way that you handle your stress inside the gym matters as well. It's very important. Now, it's not as important if you're not trying to maximize progress, but if you are, then it is. Or if you're trying to undertake a really serious training program, something that does kind of push that envelope, whether it's anything from a Bulgarian style training to some of the Russian squat programs, or some really, really high volume program that you're following, you need to learn to mitigate these things, or you're not going to make it through that program. That's why I say certain types of training are not for everyone. It's not necessarily physically that they can't handle it, it's that psychologically or some aspect of their lifestyle, they can't mitigate all elements of their stress levels enough to handle certain programs. And that's not necessarily everyone's fault. Some people are put into high stress lifestyles that maybe they didn't choose, or from choices they made earlier on and they can't do anything about at present. So if that's you, the situation, your training is going to have to be programmed around that. Just like when I have guys who come to me and say, hey, I've got this going on in school, I've got midterms, I've got to finish my doctoral thesis or whatever. It's like, okay, all right. Don't worry about your gains, because you're going to be so stressed worrying about these things, you're not going to make any progress anyway. So if you pushed yourself at that point to the level to where you could actually make decent gains, you're not going to be able to recover from it. Focus on maintenance till you're through that stressful period of your life. Do your best to hold on to what you have without pushing yourself beyond your ability to recover, and without that adding further to your stress, because that's kind of the dichotomy we run into. Training itself can remove stress. It can be therapeutic, but when training loads start to become more difficult to recover from, your level of irritability and your stress level goes up. You're not going to be able to handle other stressors in your life as well unless you prepared yourself for that. So just like the training can feed into relaxation, it can feed into a therapeutic mindset, it can also exacerbate high stress levels that aren't being managed well. It can actually make them worse, and then you're really in trouble at that point. So just stuff that you need to factor in. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.